Hello, so creative, welcome to another interesting tutorial. On today's tutorial we are going to learn how to make this free maxi cut together hand with a side loop that you can use as snatch your waist. So if it's something you will like to watch or learn how I made it, please keep watching and let's dive into our cutting table. So this is the material I made use of, 2 yards of Duchess material. So I went ahead to fold my 2 yards of Duchess material into 2 equal halves, and after folding it into two, I went ahead to fold it again, leaving 1 inch allowance for our zipper allowance. So I'm basically going to cut both the front and the back together, and note also is a cut together gown, so both the hand and everything is going to be cut on this fabric. So I went ahead to start marking out my measurement. I mark out my shoulder line, and now from my shoulder line I'm marking out my sleeve length, the place I want my sleeve to stop. So let's start marking all our vertical measurement. From our shoulder we will now mark out our armhole depth. From our shoulder we also go ahead to mark out our waistline, and from our waistline we now add our hip line. So I'm trying to now mark out the lines. I'm marking out the lines. So how do you get your armhole depth? You divide your bust by 6 plus 1.5 and plus another 1 inch for your shoulder slope. So that is how to get your armhole depth. So I'm trying to input my body measurements. I divided my bust into 4 plus 1 inch is allowance. Remember this is a free gown, so I added 1 inch is allowance at my bust and at my waist and at my hip. My bust divided by 4 plus 1 inch zip allowance. So I'm trying to join the lines together, and my waist divided by 4 plus 1 inch is allowance. So I'm trying to impute the value I got on my shoulder on my armhole depth, so to get my round hand circumference. So I've joined the lines together, and at that our ease allowance we start imputing our sewing allowance of 1.5 inches all over. So I've added it and trying to join the lines together. From our ease allowance I came out by 1.5 for our sewing allowance. So at our armhole I went up by 1/2 inch to give that place a slight curve. You can see what I did to give our cut together hand a slight curve. So I join it to the lines that we drew. So on our we will now add 1/2 inch sewing allowance on our hand circumference, and let's start working on our shoulder. And now impute my neck line, which is 3.5, and came down by 1 inch for the back neck depth. So after separating the back from the front, you are going to still alter the front neck depth. So I went ahead to mark out my shoulder slope of 1 inch. So I slope my sleeve by 1 inch, and I taper it back to my neckline measurement. So you can now move over and measure that length and see if your elbow circumference is complete. So let's start working on the length of our gown. From the shoulder I'm going to mark out the length of my gown, and whatever value I have at my hip side is what I'm going to impute at the hem of my gown. So I'm trying to mark it out like so. So I measured the value I have on my hip and now impute it at the hem of my gown. So I'm trying to join the lines together. After joining the lines together, I also went ahead to join the ease allowance together all the way down to the hem of our gown. So this is basically how our gown will be. I did not want it to be an A-line shape. I don't want it to be fuller at the downside. I just want it to be free and straight, like giving it that Gen Z body style that I can wear to anywhere. I just want it to be just straight. I don't want it to have that A-line. That's why I impute the value I have on my hip, on my head. In case you want yours to be an A-line, you can go ahead and now give it an A-line shape. So I'm trying to cut out my gown because it's all ready. So I'm cutting through all the lines that I marked, as you can see, and at the neck I'm now taking it up. So I'm trying to trim out our zipper allowance to make sure that from the shoulder to the hem is all rhyming 1 inch 1 inch. So after trimming it out, I'm now going to separate the front from the back so that I will be able to alter my front neck depth. So I'm trying to separate the front from the back. So after separating them on my front neck depth, I'm going to come down by, from my shoulder, I'm going to come down by 4 inch. I'm now going to remark my front neck depth like so. So after remarking it, I'm just basically going to cut it out. After cutting it out, we now start working on how to join them together. So I brought in my back measurement. So I'm trying to mark out where my zip will start and mark out the 1 inches that we left for our zipper allowance. So I'm just going to sew it from my shoulder all the way to the hem of my cloth. But that place I mark out, the place my zip will start, I'm going to top stitch it very well before I will now run my stitch all the way down to the hem of my cloth. Though we will add zipper, but it will be later. Let's work on the side of our cloth. So I've gone ahead to sew it and iron press it, as you can see. So sewing it and ironing it will even give you a crease line, your zip crease line, so that when sewing your zip, it will not even be hard for you. You already know where to sew your zip. So I'm placing the front on top of the back, and we are going to start marking out the allowance, the sewing allowance that we left for the cloth, and now go and sew it. So I've went ahead to join our clothes together, and let's start working on the loop side. From my shoulder, I will come down by my underbust. I want the loop to start from my underbust and end at my waist line. So from my shoulder, I came down by my underbust, and I also marked out my waist. So I'm going to divide that line by 1 inch like so. I divided it by 1 inch, and I was left with 5 lines. So basically our loop will be 5 by each side. So after marking out the line, I have gone ahead to form our loops. As you can see, just form a strip of long fabric and sew it and turn it up. That is basically your loop. So I'm trying to rip off the thread that we ran on the cloth. Remember, we have closed it before we start marking our loops, where our loop. So I'm now fixing in our loop in between the front and the back of our cloth. The length of the loop is 1.5 inch. So when I fold it together, I will be left with 0.75, and on the lines that we marked, I will now put it directly on the lines that we marked, meaning that one side of our cloth we have 5 loops, while the other side we also have 5 loops. So I'm just trying to put it in between our front and the back. After fixing the loop and pinning it down, we are now going to run a stitch back and also do the same thing at the other side of our cloth. So you have to pin it down before you go and run it for easy working. Always make use of your pin for easy working. So I'm trying to pin it down. After pinning it down, we now start working on our zipper side. So I will move over to our sewing machine and now sew it down and do the same thing at the other side of our clothes. So I will now go ahead and sew it. So after sewing it, I rip off the zipper side, and I also notch the armhole side to give it an ease, so that when I iron out my armhole, you see how our armhole side is relaxing. It's because of the notch that we notch at that armhole. So I'm now going to fold my round hand and also cut out the facing that I will use and turn our front and also our back. So you just fold the fabric into two and lay your round neck on top of the fabric, and you now use it and form your face. You see how I'm cutting it very round. After cutting out my facing, I'm now going to use it and turn my front facing. And for the back, we firstly add our zip before we now turn the back facing. So this is how neat my front facing came out to be. And the round of our sleeve, we are going to fold it into two and iron it. After ironing it, I'm going to infuse hemming gun to hold it down. I'm not going to run a stitch on it. I'll use hemming gun to hold it down. Even the hem of my clothes, I'm going to use hemming gun to hold them down so that it will come out so neat. So I went ahead to put slits at both sides of our clothes. I put 13 inches. This is 7 inches though, but later I increased the slit by 13 inches from my knee to all the way to the hem of my cloth for easy movement. So this is how I did it. I just rip off the side seam that we have sewn already until I get to my 13 inches. I now top stitch it very well so that the rope will not start ripping off from there. So after top stitching it very well, I went ahead to iron it flat and infuse my hemming gum. It's hemming gum that I used to head it down. I did not run a stitch on it, so that our clothes will come out very fine. See how fine our clothes is looking. So now we are going to add our zip. After adding our zip, we are going to just turn our back face and our clothes is very much ready. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Bye.